Prognosis that feels like a door slamming shut. Stage 4 non-small cell lung cancer. The medical consensus: palliative care. Extend life. Don't expect to save it. But then you stumble across a different path, one that involves eating nothing but meat, fasting for 3 weeks straight, and diving into some truly fringe therapies. Today we're looking at a fascinating, controversial, and deeply personal case study of a man who claims to have turned a terminal diagnosis into a new lease on life by completely rewriting the rules of his own biology.
It is a wild story, Jake, and we have to be really clear right up front. This is one man's N=1 experiment. It's anecdotal, but it touches on some exploding areas of metabolic health research that are actually gaining serious traction in the scientific community. We're talking about the Warburg effect, autophagy, and the idea that cancer might be more metabolic than genetic.
Exactly. We are not doctors and we are not giving medical advice, but we are going to unpack the journey of an acupuncturist named Robin who decided that the standard of care wasn't enough. He combined modern oncology, radiation, and immunotherapy with a radical lifestyle overhaul involving the carnivore diet and deep fasting. Rachel, where do we even begin with this?
We start in July 2020. Robin, a longtime acupuncturist in Australia, gets the bad news: stage 4 lung cancer. He goes the traditional route first, immunotherapy, and it works. To a degree, it stabilizes him, shrinks the tumors, but then the funding runs out. In Australia, for his specific condition, the government subsidy for that drug capped at 2 years. Suddenly, he's left out on a limb, as he puts it. The only option left on the table was chemotherapy, which he desperately wanted to avoid.
That is a terrifying cliff to stand on. You've got a terminal illness, the drug keeping it at bay is being taken away, and you're staring into the abyss. And that's when the algorithm steps in, right? YouTube.
The algorithm, indeed. He starts seeing videos from Dr. Shawn Baker, a prominent advocate for the carnivore diet. Now, for Robin, this was a massive paradigm shift. He's third-generation Chinese-Australian. Rice isn't just food, it's culture. It's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The idea of cutting out all plants, all grains, and eating only animal products seemed insane to him initially.
I think that's the reaction most people have. We're told from day one, eat your veggies, fiber is God, meat causes cancer. And here's this guy saying, no, actually just eat steak and eggs and you might heal. But Robin didn't just jump in because a guy on the internet had big muscles. He started connecting the dots with other researchers, specifically around visceral fat and metabolic health.
Right. He fell down the rabbit hole with Dr. Sean O'Mara, who focuses on visceral fat. That's the dangerous fat around your organs, and Dr. Anthony Chaffee. But the linchpin, the piece of the puzzle that made him commit, was the work of Professor Thomas Seyfried. Seyfried is a heavy hitter at Boston College who argues that cancer is primarily a metabolic disease, not a genetic one.
Okay, pause there. We need to break down the metabolic theory of cancer, because this is the engine driving Robin's decisions. The standard view is that cancer is genetic bad luck. DNA goes rogue, cells mutate, tumor grows. Seyfried argues it's actually about energy. The mitochondria, the power plants of the cell, get damaged and the cell reverts to a primitive form of fermentation using glucose or sugar to survive. Is that the gist?
That is the simplified version, yes. It's based on the Warburg effect, discovered by Otto Warburg back in the 1920s. He found that cancer cells are glucose gluttons. They ferment sugar even when oxygen is present. Seyfried's argument is if cancer needs glucose and sometimes glutamine to survive, what happens if you cut off the supply? If you stop eating carbohydrates, your blood glucose drops, and your body switches to burning ketones from fat. Healthy cells love ketones. Cancer cells, they can't use them effectively. You essentially try to starve the tumor while feeding the healthy tissue.
So Robin looks at this and thinks, okay, if I eat rice, I'm feeding the enemy. If I eat steak, I'm sieging the fortress. So on June 18th, 2023, a date he picked to honor his late father, he goes full carnivore. But he didn't just change his diet, he did something extreme beforehand. He did a 21-day water fast, 3 weeks, no food.
And this is where the concept of autophagy comes in. Autophagy literally means self-eating. When you stop feeding the body, it has to find energy somewhere. It starts scavenging. It breaks down damaged cells, misfolded proteins, and potentially precancerous or cancerous tissue to recycle them for fuel. Robin mentions that around day 14 of this fast, he felt a surge of energy, a life force. He believed this was his body turning on the tumors.
That is intense. I mean, most people get hangry if they miss lunch by an hour. This guy went 21 days. But let's look at the results. He does the fast. He switches to carnivore, beef, bacon, eggs, butter, no veggies. What happened to the cancer?
Well, the timeline is fascinating. He combines this metabolic approach with targeted radiation. Remember, he's not rejecting Western medicine entirely, he's hacking it. In August 2023, after the fast and starting the diet, his PET scan showed such a dramatic reduction that his oncologist said if she saw him for the first time that day, she'd classify him as stage 3, not stage 4. That is a regression. By the 6-month mark, the radiologist couldn't distinguish between scar tissue from the radiation and active cancer. There was a marked reduction.
That's incredible. It's the press pulse method Seyfried talks about. The diet is the constant press, stressing the cancer cells by removing their fuel. The radiation is the pulse, the knockout punch. But Robin isn't just doing diet and radiation, he's into some really esoteric stuff too. We have to talk about the Spooky 2 machine and, well, the other thing.
Let's start with the Spooky 2. This is based on the work of Royal Rife, an inventor from the 1930s who claimed that specific electromagnetic frequencies could destroy pathogens and cancer cells. It's widely considered pseudoscience by the mainstream medical establishment. Rife's claims have never been validated in peer-reviewed journals. However, Robin uses this device for about 4 hours a day. He calls it quantum healing.
It's interesting because he seems to layer these modalities. He has the hard science of radiation, the emerging metabolic science of keto, carnivore, and then this frequency healing, which is, let's call it metaphysical. And then there's the urine therapy. I feel like we can't gloss over that.
No, we can't. He practices urine therapy, which is exactly what it sounds like. It has roots in Ayurvedic medicine and some traditional Chinese practices. The belief is that by re-ingesting urine, you're reintroducing antigens, stem cells, and hormones back into the body to stimulate the immune system. Again, modern nephrologists will tell you urine is waste product your body is trying to expel, but Robin views it as recycling his own perfect medicine.
It really highlights his mindset, doesn't it? He mentions that he felt the medical system was conning people or keeping them ignorant. There's a deep distrust of the institutional narrative there. He talks about trusting his sixth sense or psychic intuition over his doctors. How does a guy who has been an acupuncturist for 40 years reconcile that with the science he's reading from Seyfried?
That's the tension at the heart of his story. Robin isn't anti-science, he's cafeteria science. He picks the studies that align with his intuition, like the metabolic theory, and discards the ones that don't. He admits he had a 5% doubt his whole career about whether he was just conning people with acupuncture, but the results kept him going. Now, facing death, he's applied that same logic to himself. If it feels right intuitively and there's a mechanism that makes sense to him, he does it.
Let's talk about the day-to-day, because I think people picture a cancer patient as frail. Robin is eating, what did he say, 8 to 10 eggs a day?
It's a lot. He's doing an intermittent fasting schedule, 18 hours fasting, 6 hours eating. Lunch is 3 strips of bacon, hamburger patties, and 4 sunny-side-up eggs. Dinner is a rump steak with fermented kimchi, the only plant matter he seems to tolerate, and 4 boiled eggs. He's prioritizing protein and fat to maintain muscle mass, which is crucial because cachexia, or muscle wasting, is what kills many cancer patients.
And he says he has 0 brain fog, no joint pain, and energy to burn. He even mentioned exercising 3 times a day during his fast.
That defies the stereotype of the chemo-ravaged patient lying in bed. It challenges the idea that you have to be miserable to fight cancer.
It does. And socially, it's difficult. He talks about the resistance from his family, specifically his Chinese family. Rejecting rice and noodles is almost a rejection of heritage in that context. But he's adamant. He says he chose later, not sooner, regarding death. He views his life now as an extended party he wasn't ready to leave.
I love that analogy of the dinner party. You know that feeling when the party is dying down and you think, I should go home. He felt that. He was bored. Life was mechanical. The cancer diagnosis was the jolt that made him decide, no, actually, I'm having a great time. I'm staying. It reframed his existence from passive to active.
And that active stance is key. He calls it self-empowerment. He believes we have an exit plan subconsciously, and he had to rewrite his. Whether you believe in the Rife machine or the urine therapy, you can't deny the power of agency. He stopped being a patient waiting for a doctor to save him and became the project manager of his own survival.
So, looking at the bigger picture here, we have the metabolic theory of cancer gaining ground. We have anecdotes like Robin's piling up. What does this mean for the future of oncology? Are we going to see keto for cancer becoming standard care?
We are seeing movement. There are currently clinical trials looking at ketogenic diets as an adjuvant therapy, meaning alongside chemo and radiation, for glioblastoma, brain cancer, and other solid tumors. The medical establishment moves slowly, and for good reason. They need robust safety data. But stories like Robin's provide the signal in the noise that warrants that research. The danger, of course, is people abandoning proven treatments entirely for diet alone, which can be fatal. Robin's press pulse approach, using both, is actually the most scientifically grounded part of his protocol.
Right. He didn't say no to the radiation. He said yes and. He stacked the deck. It's also worth noting the mental clarity he talks about. If you're fighting a terminal illness, your state of mind is half the battle. If a diet removes inflammation and brain fog, giving you the will to fight, that's a therapeutic benefit in itself, regardless of what it's doing to the tumor.
Absolutely. He mentions feeling joy and a life force. That's quality of life. In palliative care, quality of life is the gold standard. If eating steak and eggs makes him feel vibrant and strong at 63 with a stage 4 diagnosis, that is a success story, whatever the next scan says. He's living, not just dying slowly.
It's a provocative case. It challenges our assumptions about nutrition, medicine, and the placebo effect versus physiological change. Robin's story forces us to ask, how much control do we actually have over our biological destiny? And are we too quick to accept the standard of care as the only care?
And it reminds us that the body is incredibly resilient if given the right inputs, or perhaps if we stop giving it the wrong inputs. Robin's bet is that sugar and inflammation were the wrong inputs, and fasting and meat were the reset button. So far, he's still at the party.
A fascinating dive into the edges of medicine and human will. If this story sparks some curiosity in you, or if you know someone navigating the complex world of metabolic health, send this episode their way. Sometimes the most unconventional paths lead to the most interesting destinations.